Emma Taylor walked quickly toward the town library after school ended. The autumn air felt cool against her face. Leaves in shades of red and orange fell around her as she moved along the path. She had to finish her history project tonight. Her bag was heavy with books, but she didn't mind. Emma was one of the top students at Westfield High and worked hard to keep her perfect grades. The library was quiet when Emma arrived. Only a few other students sat at the wooden tables, typing on laptops or flipping through books. She found a spot near the back window where sunlight streamed in. Emma carefully arranged her notebooks and textbooks in neat piles. Her blue backpack, with small white stars across it, sat beside her chair. Emma opened her history book and began taking notes about World War II for her project. She wrote carefully, making sure every fact was correct. Her teacher, Mrs. Wilson, expected excellent work, and Emma was determined to deliver. After 40 minutes of studying, Emma's phone buzzed in her pocket. She saw her mother's name on the screen. Emma knew the library had strict rules about phone calls inside, so she gathered her things together in one spot. She made sure her backpack was tucked safely under the table, then stepped outside to answer. "Hi, Mum," Emma said, standing just outside the library doors. "Emma, love, are you coming home soon? Dad wants to know if you'll be here for dinner," her mother asked. "I should be done in about an hour," Emma replied. "I'm making good progress on my project." They talked for a few more minutes about what they would have for dinner. Emma promised to text when she was leaving the library. She ended the call and turned to go back inside, unaware that everything was about to change. When Emma pushed open the heavy library door, she noticed something different. A police officer stood near her table, looking at the items left there. He was tall with short brown hair, and his name badge read, Officer Mills. Several students stood nearby, watching with curious eyes. Emma walked calmly toward her table. "Excuse me," she said politely to the officer. "Those are my things." Officer Mills looked at her with cold eyes. He held her blue backpack in his hands, already unzipped. "This bag?" he asked in a doubtful tone. "Yes, sir," Emma replied. "I just stepped outside to take a phone call from my mother." The officer didn't hand back the bag. Instead, he continued looking through it. "We've had reports of stolen items in the library today. Someone took a laptop and some other electronics." Emma felt her heart beat faster, but she kept her voice steady. "I understand, sir, but that's definitely my backpack. My school ID is in the front pocket." Officer Mills pulled out her student card and examined it. "Emma Taylor," he read aloud. Then looked at her with narrowed eyes. "This could be anyone's ID that you've taken." Emma noticed something that made her stomach twist. 3 other students at nearby tables had similar blue backpacks. All of them were white students. None of them were being questioned. "Sir, I've had that backpack since the school year started. My mum bought it for me at Wilson's department store. I can describe everything that's in it," Emma explained, trying to stay calm despite feeling heat rise to her face. A few students had stopped, pretending to read, and were openly watching now. Emma saw Oliver, a boy from her math class, frowning at the situation. "Look," Officer Mills said, zipping the backpack closed but keeping it in his grip. "I need to verify ownership properly. You'll need to come down to the station to sort this out." Emma blinked in surprise. "The police station? But I haven't done anything wrong. I was just studying. If this is really your bag and you haven't done anything wrong, then you have nothing to worry about," the officer replied, his tone suggesting he didn't believe her. Emma looked around at the other students with blue backpacks. "Are you asking everyone with a blue backpack to go to the station?" she asked. Quietly. Officer Mills's face hardened. "Don't make this difficult, young lady. Get your other belongings and come with me." Emma felt everyone watching her. Some students whispered to each other. Others looked away, uncomfortable. Oliver had taken out his phone and appeared to be recording the interaction. With shaking hands, Emma gathered her books and notebooks. "May I call my father first?" she asked. "You can call your parents from the station," Officer Mills replied. Emma stood tall, despite feeling small inside. "I know my rights, sir. I'm allowed to inform my parents about where I'm going." The officer hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "Make it quick." Emma stepped a few feet away and pulled out her phone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed. "When?" her father answered. She spoke clearly despite the lump in her throat. "Dad, I'm at the library. A police officer is taking my backpack. He thinks it's stolen. He wants me to come to the station." She listened to her father's calm voice on the other end. His words gave her strength. "Yes, I'll be careful. I'll meet you there," Emma said before ending the call. She turned back to Officer Mills, her chin held high despite the unfairness burning in her chest. "My father will meet us at the station," she said. "He'd like to understand why this is happening." Thomas. Taylor sat at his desk reviewing reports when his phone rang. He recognized Emma's number and answered immediately. "Dad?" Emma's voice was steady, but he could hear the tension in it. "I'm at the library. A police officer is taking my backpack. He thinks it's stolen. He wants me to come to the station." Thomas felt a rush of anger, but kept his voice calm. He had been chief of police in Westfield for only 3 months. After 20 years on the force in London, he had moved his family to this smaller town, hoping for a better life for Emma. "Tell me exactly what happened," Thomas said, reaching for a notepad. Emma explained everything clearly: how she had stepped outside to take her mother's call, how Officer Mills had singled her out among students with similar backpacks, and how he refused to accept her explanation. "Dad, I know who you are," Emma said softly, her voice dropping to a whisper so the officer wouldn't hear. "You could make one call and fix this. But I don't want special treatment. I just want to be treated fairly, like everyone else." Thomas closed his eyes briefly, pride mixed with sadness in his chest. His 16-year-old daughter shouldn't have to face this situation, but she was handling it with remarkable maturity. "I know, sweetheart," Thomas replied, "and you're right. Here's what I want you to do. Follow procedure exactly as Officer Mills instructs. Be polite but firm. Document everything, the time, what he says, what happens. I'll meet you at the station, but I won't come as the chief. I'll come as your father first." "Okay," Emma said. "I understand. One more thing," Thomas added. "This isn't right, Emma, and we will address it, but we'll do it properly, through the correct channels. That's how real change happens." Emma ended the call and turned back toward Officer Mills, who was waiting impatiently. She noticed Oliver Johnson, a boy from her math class, standing nearby. His phone was pointed in their direction. "That was unfair," Oliver whispered as she walked past. He tilted his phone screen toward her. "I recorded everything. Look." On the screen, Emma saw herself calmly explaining that the backpack was hers, while Officer Mills dismissed her claims. The video clearly showed other students with similar backpacks being left alone. "Do you want me to come with you?" Oliver asked. "As a witness?" Emma felt a small spark of hope. She hadn't made many friends since moving to Westfield. Most students kept their distance, unsure about the new girl. This was the first time anyone had stepped up for her. "Thank you," Emma replied with a small smile. "But I'll be okay. My dad is meeting me there." Oliver nodded. "I'll send you the video, just in case you need it." Emma gave him her phone number, then walked back to Officer Mills. "Ready now?" the officer asked, his tone making it clear he found the whole situation tiresome. "Yes, sir," Emma replied, memorizing his badge number as she followed him out of the library. Meanwhile, at the Taylor home, Mary Taylor's phone rang. She wiped her hands on a dish towel before answering. "Mary, it's Thomas," her husband said. "Emma's being brought to the station by an officer who thinks her backpack is stolen." Mary's hand tightened around the phone. "Which officer? What happened? Is she okay?" Thomas explained the situation quickly. Mary began pacing the kitchen, moving from the sink to the refrigerator and back again. "I'm going down there right now," Mary said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I'm on my way too," Thomas replied. "But Mary, we need to handle this carefully." "Carefully?" Mary stopped pacing. "Our daughter is being treated like a criminal for no reason, and you want to be careful?" Thomas sighed. "I understand how you feel, but remember why we came here. I took this job because we wanted to make a difference. We can't do that if I throw my weight around every time something happens to Emma." Mary was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "I've seen these procedures fail too many times, Thomas. My entire childhood, my parents were told to trust the system. And where did that get us?" "This time is different," Thomas said gently. "I'm part of the system now. We can change it from within." but only if we do it right. Mary closed her eyes. The memories of her own childhood experiences with police still hurt after all these years. Emma is strong, Thomas continued. She wants to handle this herself with our support. Let's trust her. And let's trust the process we've been working to improve. After a long pause, Mary nodded, though her husband couldn't see it. All right, but I'm still coming down there. I wouldn't expect anything else, Thomas replied with a small smile in his voice. I'll see you there. Mary hung up and leaned against the kitchen counter. The Taylor family had moved to Westfield just 3 months ago when Thomas accepted the position of chief of police. They had decided to keep his job somewhat quiet at first, allowing Emma to make friends on her own terms without the complications that came with being the chief's daughter. Now Mary wondered if that had been the right choice. If Officer Mills had known who Emma's father was, would he have treated her differently? Probably, but that wasn't real change. That was just fear of consequences. Mary grabbed her car keys and her purse. As she headed for the door, she thought about Emma facing this situation with courage and dignity. Perhaps Thomas was right. Perhaps their daughter needed to learn to stand up for herself, but Mary would make sure she didn't have to do it alone. Officer Robert Mills drove to the police station with Emma sitting silently in the back seat. He glanced at her in the mirror. She sat straight, eyes forward, not crying or complaining like most teenagers would. This made him slightly uncomfortable, though he wouldn't admit it. "We'll get this sorted quickly if you cooperate," he said, breaking the silence. "Yes, sir," Emma replied calmly. Mills parked in the station lot and led Emma inside, still carrying her blue backpack. He expected to find her waiting for him at the front desk. Instead, he was surprised to see Emma already seated in the waiting area. A well-dressed man in a crisp, dark suit sat beside her. They appeared to be having a quiet conversation. The man wore no uniform, but something about his posture suggested authority. Mills felt a twinge of uncertainty, but pushed it aside. "I'm here about the backpack situation," Mills announced to the desk sergeant, Officer Lucy Bennett. He placed Emma's backpack on the counter. Officer Bennett looked up from her computer. Her eyes moved from Mills to Emma, and then to the man beside her. A strange expression crossed her face, and something between surprise and worry. "Sir, this is Emma Taylor," Bennett said carefully. "She's brought her school records and library card as identification." Mills frowned. "That doesn't prove the backpack is hers. Anyone could have those items." "Perhaps this will help," the man beside Emma said, speaking for the first time. His voice was deep and calm as he stood and approached the desk. He handed over several photographs, showing Emma wearing the identical blue backpack with white stars. In one photo, Emma stood smiling in front of their house on the first day of school. Another showed her studying at a desk, the backpack hanging on her chair. The final picture showed the inside flap of the backpack where Emma Taylor was neatly stitched in white thread. Mills examined the photos with growing discomfort. The evidence was clear, but he wasn't ready to admit he might have made a mistake. "And you are?" Mills asked, looking at the well-dressed man with a touch of annoyance. Before the man could answer, the door to the inner offices opened. Captain James Wilson stepped out holding a coffee mug. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the group at the front desk. Coffee sloshed over the rim of his mug, but he didn't seem to notice. "Chief Taylor," Wilson exclaimed, his eyes wide. "I didn't know you were coming in today." The color drained from Officer Mills's face as he looked between Emma and the man now revealed as Chief Thomas Taylor. His mind raced back through everything he had said and done at the library, every dismissive word, every assumption he had made. The station fell strangely quiet. The officers at nearby desks had stopped what they were doing. Even the phones seemed to ring less frequently. "My daughter called about a misunderstanding," Thomas explained evenly. Officer Mills was concerned about her backpack. Emma watched the scene unfold with mixed feelings. Part of her wanted to smile at the shock on Officer Mills's face. Another part felt sad that it took her father's position to make the officer take her seriously. Captain Wilson rushed forward, setting his dripping mug down on a desk. "Of course, Chief. We'll get this cleared up right away." He turned to Mills with a stern look. "Officer, return Miss Taylor's property immediately." Mills hesitated only briefly before pushing the backpack across the counter toward Emma. There seems to have been a misunderstanding, he muttered. Yes, Thomas agreed, his voice still calm but with a firmness that filled the room. Her misunderstanding that resulted in my daughter being brought to the station and treated like a suspect when she was simply studying at the library. Officer Bennett looked down at her keyboard. Captain Wilson adjusted his tie nervously. Chief, I assure you that Officer Mills was just following protocol for the reported thefts, Captain Wilson said. Was the protocol to question only my daughter when several students had similar backpacks? Thomas asked. His tone remained professional, but his eyes held a challenge. Wilson opened his mouth, then closed it again. Officer Mills stood uncomfortably, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Sir, I didn't know she was your daughter. Thomas turned his full attention to Mills. And that's precisely the problem, isn't it, officer? Would you have treated her differently if you had known? Should it matter who her father is? The questions hung in the air. Mills had no answer. Emma picked up her backpack from the counter and checked that all her things were still inside. She found her history notes slightly crumpled, but otherwise untouched. Mary Taylor pushed open the station door, slightly out of breath as if she had rushed from the car. Her eyes found Emma first, checking that her daughter was okay, then moved to Thomas with a questioning look. Thomas gave her a small nod that seemed to say, "Everything's under control." "Perhaps we should discuss this in private," Thomas suggested, to Captain Wilson, gesturing toward the conference room. Wilson nodded quickly. "Yes, of course, Chief." He turned to Mills. "Officer Mills, join us, please." As the men prepared to move to the conference room, Emma caught her father's eye. A silent understanding passed between them. This wasn't just about her backpack anymore. This was about something much bigger. Mary sat down next to Emma in the waiting area and took her hand. "Are you okay?" she whispered. Emma nodded, watching as her father led the way to the conference room, his back straight, his steps measured and confident. "Dad's not angry," Emma observed quietly. "He's disappointed. And somehow that's worse." Mary squeezed her daughter's hand. "Your father believes in fixing problems, not just punishing people. That's why he became chief." Through the glass walls of the conference room, Emma could see Officer Mills taking a seat at the table, his face serious. Captain Wilson looked nervous, but Thomas Taylor looked completely in control as he closed the door behind them. Inside the conference room, Thomas closed the door quietly. The sound of the latch clicking into place seemed very loud in the silent room. Captain Wilson stood nervously by the window, while Officer Mills remained standing stiffly near the door. "Please, sit down," Thomas said, gesturing to the chairs. Around the wooden table, Captain Wilson sat immediately. Officer Mills remained standing, his back straight, his chin lifted slightly. "Chief, I was just following protocol for reported thefts in the area," Mills said firmly. "We had 3 reports of stolen items from the library this week." Thomas nodded slowly. He pulled out a chair and sat down, placing his hands flat on the table. "I understand. And did you question all students with similar backpacks, or only my daughter?" The question hung in the air. Mills opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. Finally, the answer was clear without words being spoken. "Robert," Thomas said gently, using the officer's first name, "I'm not here to embarrass or punish you. I'm here as a father and as your chief." Mills blinked, surprised at the use of his first name. His shoulders remained tense, but confusion flickered across his face. Thomas placed a hand on the back of an empty chair. 25 years ago, I was stopped by an officer while walking home from school. My backpack was searched, my character questioned. The officer never knew I was the mayor's son because we didn't share the same last name. Mills finally sat down, his discomfort visible in the way he perched on the edge of the chair. "I was 15, Thomas continued. "It was a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because I had a math test that day. I got an A and I was walking home feeling proud of myself." Thomas paused, his eyes focusing on a distant memory. "The officer said someone matching my description had been seen breaking into cars. He made me empty my backpack on the sidewalk. My books, my lunchbox, everything spread out for all my neighbors to see." Captain Wilson shifted in his chair, looking down at his hands. "What hurt most wasn't the stop," Thomas said, his voice steady. "It was how it made me feel like I didn't belong in my own community. Today my daughter felt that same pain. Outside in the waiting area, Emma sat beside her mother. Through the glass walls of the conference room, she could see her father speaking. His face was calm, his hands steady. Officer Mills sat across from him, no longer looking defiant, but not exactly apologetic either. "What do you think Dad is saying to him?" Emma asked quietly. Mary watched her husband through the glass. After 20 years of marriage, she could read his expressions even at a distance. "He's telling his story," she said simply. "His story." Mary nodded. "Your father was stopped by police many times when he was young. That's part of why he became an officer. He wanted to change things from the inside." Emma looked at her father with new understanding. "He never told me that." "Some stories are hard to tell," Mary replied, "but I think he's sharing it now." Inside the conference room, Thomas leaned forward slightly. "Robert, do you know why I took this job in Westfield?" Mills shook his head. "Because small communities can lead big changes," Thomas explained. "In London, I was one voice among thousands. Here we can create a police force that truly serves everyone equally." Captain Wilson nodded eagerly. "We're committed to that vision, Chief." Thomas gave him a level look. "Are we? Because what happened today suggests otherwise." Wilson's smile faded. "I don't believe Officer Mills is a bad person," Thomas continued. "But I do believe he made assumptions about my daughter based on how she looks." Mills started to protest, but Thomas held up a hand. "Think carefully before you deny it. Did you question any of the white students with similar backpacks? Did you ask to see their IDs? Did you bring any of them to the station?" Mills looked down at the table. "This isn't about punishment," Thomas said. "This is about growth, about recognizing patterns in our thinking that we might not even be aware of." Outside, Emma watched as Officer Mills nodded slowly. His expression was changing from defensive to thoughtful. She had expected her father to be angry, to use his position to make the officer sorry. Instead, he was speaking calmly, connecting with Mills as a person. "Dad doesn't want revenge," she explained to her mother. "He wants change." Mary smiled sadly. "That's always been his way, even when he has every right to be angry." Inside the conference room, Thomas stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the town square, watching people walk past the station without a second glance. "When I was a young officer," he said, "I had a mentor who taught me something important. He said, 'The badge gives you authority, but how you treat people gives you respect.' I've never forgotten that." He turned back to face Mills and Wilson. "I want Westfield Police to be known for both authority and respect. We can't have one without the other." Mills looked up, meeting Thomas's eyes for the first time since they entered the room. "What do you want me to do, Chief?" he asked quietly. "First, I want you to apologize to my daughter. Not because she's my daughter, but because she deserves it," Thomas replied. "Then I want you to help me develop a training program on community interaction. Your experience today could help other officers avoid similar mistakes." Mills seemed surprised by the suggestion. "You want me to help with training? After what happened?" Thomas nodded. "Sometimes the best teachers are those who have made mistakes and learned from them. Are you willing to learn from this, Robert?" There was a long moment of silence. Captain Wilson watched nervously, his eyes moving between the chief and Officer Mills. Finally, Mills straightened in his chair. "Yes, sir, I am." Thomas extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Mills stood and shook it firmly. "Good," Thomas said. "Now let's go talk to Emma." As they walked toward the door, Captain Wilson asked, "Chief, will there be any official disciplinary action?" Thomas paused with his hand on the doorknob. "That depends on Officer Mills. If he turns this mistake into an opportunity for growth, both for himself and the department, then no. I believe in second chances, Captain. But just one." He opened the door and led the way back to where Emma and Mary waited. The community center buzzed with voices as people filed in and took their seats. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting warm patches of light across the wooden floor. At the back of the room, Emma Taylor adjusted her note cards and took a deep breath. "Nervous?" Thomas asked, standing beside her in his formal police uniform. Emma nodded. "A little. There are so many people." The room was indeed full. Police officers in uniform sat in neat rows. Students from Westfield High filled the back section. Community members, parents, and town officials occupied the middle seats. Even the mayor had come to show support for the new Youth Police Partnership program. In the front row, Officer Robert Mills sat with his hands clasped in his lap. He looked different from that day 6 months ago, more relaxed, more thoughtful. Beside him sat Oliver, who had become one of Emma's closest friends. "It's time," Thomas said gently, giving his daughter's shoulder a squeeze. Emma walked to the small stage and stood behind the podium. The room grew quiet as people noticed her. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged her notes, but her voice was clear and strong when she began to speak. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Emma Taylor. 6 months ago, I was just a new student at Westfield High, trying to fit in. Then one afternoon at the library, something happened that changed everything." Emma told the story simply, how Officer Mills had taken her backpack, how she had been singled out when others were not questioned, how she had felt in that moment. "When Officer Mills took my backpack that day," Emma continued, "I could have chosen anger. My first feeling was anger, and I think that's natural, but my father taught me to choose understanding, not to excuse what happened, but to help prevent it from happening again." She looked at her father, who stood at the side of the room watching proudly. That day started a conversation, a difficult one, but an important one, and from that conversation came this program we're launching today. The Youth Police Partnership Program had been Thomas's idea, but Emma and Officer Mills had helped shape it. High school students would work directly with police officers on community projects. They would learn about police procedures, and officers would learn to see students as individuals, not stereotypes. "This program isn't just about teenagers and police officers getting along better," Emma explained. "It's about building a community where everyone feels they belong, where everyone is treated with respect, and where mistakes become opportunities for growth." When Emma finished speaking, the applause was loud and genuine. Thomas stepped up to the podium next, explaining the details of the program. Then Officer Mills spoke, his words honest and direct. "I made a mistake that day," he admitted to the crowd. "I saw what I expected to see, not what was actually there. I'm grateful for the chance to do better." After the ceremony ended, people gathered in small groups, talking and enjoying refreshments. Emma stood with Oliver and some other students from the program when Officer Mills approached her. "I want to thank you," he said quietly. "Your forgiveness gave me a chance to become a better officer and a better person." Emma smiled. "Sometimes the hardest moments lead to the most important changes." Mills nodded. "I've learned more in these past 6 months than in my previous 5 years on the force." Emma had seen the change in him. Officer Mills now led the department's community engagement team. He had worked with Thomas to develop training programs addressing unconscious bias. More importantly, he had become a genuine advocate for change within the police force. As the event wound down, Mary joined Emma and Thomas. "Shall we walk home? It's such a beautiful evening." The three of them left the community center together. The spring air was warm, and the trees along Main Street were covered in fresh green leaves. Neighbors waved as they passed. "I heard Mrs. Wilson from the library telling everyone how proud she is of you," Mary told Emma. "She says you've inspired other students to get involved." Emma smiled. The Youth Police Partnership already had 30 students signed up. Oliver had helped recruit many of them. As they turned onto their street, Thomas put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "I'm proud of you, Emma. Not just for your speech tonight, but for how you've handled everything since that day at the library." "I learned from you, Dad," she replied. "You showed me that real strength isn't about power or position. It's about having the courage to have difficult conversations and the grace to listen." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "You know, when I took this job, I hoped to make some small changes in how things work. I never expected to start something this big." "Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to speak up," Mary added. "And another person willing to listen." They reached their house just as the sun was setting. The golden evening light made everything look warm and hopeful. Emma looked back at the path they had walked, thinking about how much had changed in 6 months. What had started as a painful experience had grown into something powerful. Students who had never spoken to police officers, except in moments of trouble, were now working alongside them. Officers who had seen teenagers as potential problems were now seeing them as partners. "Do you think it will last?" Emma asked as they reached their front door. "The changes we've made?" Thomas smiled. "That depends on all of us. Change isn't something that happens once and stays forever. It's something we choose every day." Emma nodded, understanding. In the golden evening light, father and daughter continued their walk to the front door. Two people who had turned a moment of injustice into a foundation for genuine understanding and community healing. The end.